Hi, this is Christine, joining you today with our resident expert in all things personal injury, Attorney Roy Massey.
Hello.
And today we're going to be talking about the situation involving ride sharing and what to do if you get in an accident. Why don't we begin first with a scenario of what we do right after an accident happens. Let's say we are a passenger and the accident has occurred. What's the first thing we should do?
Well, you should always be sure that the police are called for any accident, no matter how minor. And once they arrive, you may need to defer initially to the drivers because the officer will want to talk to the drivers about what happened. But see if you can listen in. You certainly can hear what your own driver says, but you want to see what the drivers say. And if you feel you have something to add to the narrative for the accident report, you certainly should offer that to the police officer if something isn't being told the way you recall it, because sometimes people have their own stories. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, be sure the accident report is completed. If you have a camera and you can safely exit the car, you're not too hurt to do that, mm-hmm. you want to try to get pictures of the damage to all vehicles mm-hmm. to show what the size of the impact was in the event that you have an injury. You can say, well, this was the type of impact that we had. Okay, so after the pictures and after the report, you want to be certain that the officer has all the insurance information. Insofar as an Uber driver is concerned, mm-hmm. he or she may have their own particular insurance policy as a personal driver and one as an Uber driver. They could be the same, but I'll get into the differences as well. But you want to be sure that you get all of his or her insurance information mm-hmm.
Before
you leave the scene. And determine when the report will be ready for pickup.
Do we need to get any other bits of information prior to leaving the scene of the accident?
Not unless something jumps out at you or something very specific that you think you need to do, but the photos and the information about the coverage is pretty much what you need to do.
Great, okay. Well, let's talk a little bit about damages, if we could.
Sure.
So in terms of medical damages, is there a likelihood you can speak to as far as what you're able to recover?
Well, it all depends on the injury. The good news that follows the bad news. And by that I mean if you're injured, that's not good news. But if you are injured, most of the time in New Jersey, with some exception, you have to prove a permanent injury to recover. In the case of an Uber driver, if it is the Uber driver's fault, because usually there's two vehicles, as to the Uber driver's responsibility, you do not have to prove a permanent injury. You can have an injury and recover, or have it not be as serious as another injury might be, and still recover. In terms of what is available, it's interesting, the Uber drivers, when they are off duty, have the coverage that you and I might choose for our own policy. Once he clocks in and is ready to work, a new coverage comes into play. And when he picks you up, which is what you need to be concerned with, another coverage comes into play. Mm-hmm. And that coverage is, as far as liability, if it is the Uber driver's fault, there is a $1.5 million requirement for insurance for the Uber driver. That doesn't mean you get that, it means that's there. Mm-hmm. If the other driver involved, if there is another driver, is at fault and they are not insured, then there is also a $1.5 million uninsured or underinsured motorist portion of the policy. But as far as liability, what you might recover for pain and suffering depending on your injury is concerned, those are the things you have to be aware of. 1.5 million liability, 1.5 million uninsured motorist, and do not have to prove permanent injury.
Got it. Okay, thank you for enlightening us on that matter.
Welcome.
How about in terms of other kind of damages and recovery from that?
Okay. This is where, since this law is relatively new, the last couple of years, it's a little bit murky as to what's available to you. Because again of the concerns about being a livery vehicle, a vehicle for hire, the usual rules about what's available for medical bills does not apply. Two scenarios. You're a passenger and you're a pedestrian who's struck. So let's take the passenger first. If you have your own car at home and you're just taking the Uber to get to the airport or whatever, you should see if you have what's called med pay in your policy. That's usually very minimal, $1,000, maybe up to $9,000 or more, and may not apply. All of these scenarios, unfortunately, may or may not apply because the law is so new. The next thing you should try is, again, making a claim under the what we call the PIP, Personal Injury Protection benefits of the policy you have at home, or if you don't own a car, people you live with, relatives that have a car. And you see if they will cover that. They may not because of this new law and this scenario. So the third would be the ride-sharing personal limits of the driver's policy. So if he's insured with, let's say, Geico, to drive his car around without being an Uber driver, you want to know what that is, or at least how to contact them. If there is a ride-sharing policy available, if it is Uber or Lyft, to the company itself, I think that probably is required. You want to access that ride-sharing information in terms of coverage for medical bills. If that doesn't work, then you can try to access your own major medical coverage. This would be the insurance that you have through your job, or if you're fortunate enough to have private insurance or work for the state and insurance is provided. If you have no other coverages, that company may say, okay, you've shown us there's no other insurance, we'll cover you. Mm-hmm. If they do not, then you, to be safe, should file an application with what we call PLIGA, P-L-I-G-A, the Property Liability Insurance Guarantee Association of New Jersey. Mm-hmm. They don't have a lot of limits. They have about 15,000, and you must file the application within 90 days of the accident, or within 90 days of when you know that you're not covered by anyone else. But to be safe, 90 days from the accident, within 90 days, return a receipt. And there are forms online for that. And if they reject you, which is not uncommon nowadays, mm-hmm. your only other option is to sue the other driver, mm-hmm. but that would have to wait. Your medical providers would have to wait to be paid until you finish that lawsuit, and that might be a little bit dicey, but that's your final option. If you are a pedestrian, so you get hit and you're not in the vehicle, now if you have a policy at home, you can try to access that for your PIP coverage, because that might be something that's available to you. Again, the ride-share vehicle liability policy would be your second option. Your major medical, the PLIGA, and then sue. But you might be able to get your PIP. I would try first the PLIGA and also claim against your PIP, personal injury protection. Somewhere along the lines, it seems very odd that you wouldn't be covered by something, but again, it's new law, it's up in the air.
Thank you so much, Roy, for providing us with all of this information. I'm sure our audience members will certainly appreciate it and take this advice to heart. And that will do it for today. Thank you so much for joining us.